Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tenpenny Files. I'm your host, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. The Tenpenny Files is daily conversations with authors, documentary filmmakers, and independent thinkers who challenge the mainstream messaging. There's something here for everyone. We have conversations with people that are from government, from politics, from vaccine policy, from health law, and at least once a week, we have a conversation with a pastor or a writer that writes about faith and biblical principles. We have something here for everyone. There's something entertaining for everyone too, to expand your mind and teach you new information that you didn't know. My goal is to introduce you to topics that you've never heard of before, or topics you always wished you'd had time to explore, but you didn't know where to begin. Let our guests show you the way. We are here every day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, to hear from the Tenpenny Files, from voices who've been ignored, silenced, or censored, but truly have something important to say. And one last thing before we begin, please become a Tenpenny Prime member. Go to primemembership.drtenpenny.com, primemembership.drtenpenny.com. Learn more about our program and hopefully support us in the work that we do. And thank you for all of our regular listeners that join us here every day, and for all of our new listeners, because we're growing really quickly. We so appreciate you being here. So now let's get started. Today's conversation is with retired career Marine and president of Strategic Reliance Group, Colonel William Dunn, to talk about his book, Gunfighter's Rule, his life story about becoming a Marine, a story of resilience and determination. Colonel Dunn, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. I'm glad to finally meet you. I feel like I already know you after reading your book.
Well, hey, thanks so much for having me, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, why did you decide to write this book after you had retired from the Marines?
Well, that's a great question. And so when I was a forward air controller during OAF1, I kept a journal, and we were a Marine infantry battalion, and I was a company forward air controller, which means our FIST team was going to control air and bring it in on the enemy as we, drove to Baghdad. And so I kept that journal, and all the Marines in the track, we were in a Amtrak. They were saying, hey, sir, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. And so I had never really thought about it, but I kept that journal. And then as we got out of OAF1, we finished that war. There was a lot of, let's just say, a lot of stories right there in that event from, spending about 4 months in combat. And then I came back and I did some other things, and I ended up going back into Iraq as a squadron commander of the gunfighters, hence the name of the book. And all of that, I would say there's a lot of pent up aggression, if you will, if you're a combat person, and many times. And so when I finished up the squadron tour, I sat down and literally in about 3 weeks I wrote the book. But then it was very stressful, and it took me about many years to get it from finished book into published book, because it was a very stressful thing to do. And when you go back and look at some of the things that you did in combat and the things you saw in combat, sometimes that brings out some different emotions. So it took a long time to get what I would say a finished book to a published book, but I was glad I did it.
Well, it reads very well. It reads, it's like a suspense thriller. It just like pulls you through all the different battles and all the kind of behind the scene things that happen on a squadron and within your commander and things like that that the general public wouldn't know about. They wouldn't know, some of the stories of things that would happen, and that's what really makes it interesting, because we as civilians get a little behind the scenes look at what it means to be a Marine. And that's why it's really, really a compelling book to read.
Well, thank you. And yeah, one of the things that I wanted to bring out is the family aspect of it, because when you're a career Marine, whether you're a man or a woman and you have a family, your family is serving too. Sometimes that's good. And as you read through the book, you'll see some stuff that my wife went through that wasn't very nice. It's shocking, and even today, we'll talk about it, and it's some things that I did not see because it's behind the scenes. Some of the, sometimes men and women can be petty at things, and I decided it was important to put that in the book because I would like the reader to understand, there is a huge, and I believe there's a beautiful impression of the Marine Corps, which I agree, and I love the Marine Corps. but not everything is clean and rosy. And I tried to bring that out in the book because that's life. We have great Marines, 99% of them are great, but occasionally we'll have a few that aren't so great. And the public needs to understand that. We're just human beings too.
Yeah, you're human beings too, trained to do a specific job. And I think that people who aren't in the military don't understand it. In your book, The Gunfighter's Rule, you bring out the fact that you've wanted to be a Marine ever since you were, a young boy. That you decided
Yeah.
your family was in the military, your family was in the Air Force, but you wanted to be a Marine. And after a full career, 33 years in the Marines, looking back, was the time in the Marine Corps everything you thought it would be?
Oh, it was more. I mean, to say that, I mean, you look at my hair. When I retired, I tried to grow a beard. I tried to let my hair grow long. I couldn't do it. So I mean, I'm still a Marine, right? Once a Marine, always a Marine. It was more. It gave me as a human being, it gave me everything that I've had in my life and in my family too. My oldest daughter, Big S in the book, it's funny, and I don't think I put this part in the book, but she one day met a guy. He was a nice kid, and he would cry a lot. And he was a friend of hers, and she called me up and she said, "Dad, I just don't understand it. I am used to living with, hard men, Marines." She goes, "I have a hard time dealing with a guy that's crying because every one of our friends that she saw are just they're tough Marines, right?" So it's just a way of life, and I loved it. And I would say for what my expectations were, I didn't really know what my expectations were coming in the Marine Corps as a 17-year-old, but it gave me everything, and it was far more. I hate to say this, but the Marine Corps unfortunately gave me way more than I was able to give because they just gave me everything. And I tried to give back as much as I could, but they give you so much more than a individual because it's a team. An individual can probably never give back unless you give your life. Unfortunately, some Marines have given their life for our Corps and our country, but you can never give back what the Marine Corps gives you fully because they give you everything, in my opinion.
That's really a strong recommendation. Would you encourage young people to become a Marine?
Not all,
Hmm.
right? I would, well, a friend of mine gave me this saying one day, and our dress uniform is called dress blues, and he said dress blues come in many sizes, but they don't fit everybody. And so, if you want to come in the Marine Corps, it takes a special man or woman to do it. And I love the other services, right? I do. But the Marines are different, and not everyone can be a Marine, and that's how we want it. But I would always recommend someone to try. But if you try, you better be ready because the Marine Corps will get you through. But it's something you really have to love because, and someone asked me this question one day. They brought up a point, well, your family comes first. And I would say, unfortunately, I would disagree in the military, your family does not come first. The military comes first because if they did, you wouldn't deploy, right? Oh, hey, you have to deploy for 6 months. You say, well, my family comes first. I'm not going. So we can never put our families first in the military completely because when the call comes to deploy and go into combat, you have to pack your bags and go. And there's no looking back. You go. So you can't put your family first. But that is why the Marine Corps family does the best that they can do to take care of your family when you're gone. And in most instances, it is truly a family for the deployers, whether they're men and women, and for the families back home.
You told a story in the book about a woman Marine. I believe she was she was a fighter pilot, and she wanted to not go to the
Yeah,
commander ball because she just had a baby and she wanted to stay home and nurse her baby. But then there was a group that had gotten killed, and she was like, "I'm ready to go back. I need to go back." So it was more important for her to re-engage as a Marine
right.
then didn't want to go to the ball because she was wanting to, breastfeed her baby.
Yeah.
How do men basically feel about women as Marines?
Well, I love them. but they have got to be I have served in combat with women pilots. I flew combat missions with them in my aircraft. No problem. No problem. But everybody, whether you're a man or a woman, has got to meet the standard. And what we have done over time, and I did, and like I say, I'm speaking from perfect knowledge. When I was in flight school, there was a Navy female student that had failed. We called them downs. She had received 6 downs. A male would get 2 and you were out. She had received 6, and she almost killed me. She almost caused an aircraft mishap when I was in the aircraft, and I had to give the instructor a direct order to take controls of the aircraft. And I was a second lieutenant. He was way senior to me. He was a Navy lieutenant, but he knew if he took controls, she gets another down. Well, she went on and finished. Now, I don't know what kind of pilot she became, whether she was the greatest pilot in the Navy or not, but there's a design to fly a certain amount of time, and nobody should be given what I consider extra time above anyone else. And I am confident that our Marine pilots, regardless of their men or women, are outstanding. And you need to have that belief when you're sitting next to someone or sitting behind someone and you're going to fly a combat mission. I don't want to doubt whether or not you're going to get me killed. I have to know that you are the best. And the female pilots that I personally flew with, I never had one concern.
And
Not
I think
one.
that's what Secretary Hegseth had said, in his approval process. He said, I don't care if they're man, woman, if they're green, purple, or blue, as long as they meet the standards, and I think that
That's right.
that's the same thing that you're saying, is that everyone has to perform to that same standard for that confidence level. In your book, Gunfighter's Rule, it's a very intimate autobiography about your life as a Marine commander. In all the 33 years that you were in the Marines and being a commander, which part did you like the best?
It's funny. It's funny you asked that because I just had this conversation with my wife the other day. I'm one of the type of individuals. I love wherever I live. I've never had a bad duty assignment. My favorite time in the Marine Corps was when I was a first lieutenant flying Cobras out of New River, North Carolina, as a brand new pilot. That was probably my favorite time as a human being. My best time as a Marine is always when I've been in command. Command to me, the honor of command is just it's amazing. And I have been blessed because I commanded a squadron, and then I commanded a Marine aircraft group, and then I commanded a Marine expeditionary unit. And I have been blessed. It's like they took an average guy and they surrounded me with the best possible staffs. And so I ended up having exceptional commands because of the people that I was surrounded with. And I tell you, I've heard some people they call it the burden of command, right? To me, if someone said that to me, I would want to take the command away from them.
Mm.
It's not a burden. It's an honor. It's a privilege. And some of my very good friends have called this is terrible. This is the burden of command. I'm like, I never felt burdened one day. I felt stressed, right? Stressed. I felt heavy concern, but I never once thought that any other commander could do a better job than me commanding my unit. And if you don't believe that as a commander, they should find someone else. Period.
So the corollary to that is you explained what you liked the best. What did you like the least?
Well, that's a tough question. Um, I do a brief, and on that brief, there's 44 names on the slide. And so I put this brief up. And I do it for an impact purpose. And so I'll ask. I did this as a MU commander. I put the list up, and I said, "Does anyone know what this list is?" And a bunch of jokes came out, right? Which is what I expect from pilots. And I can't even. I won't even say the jokes, right? And so then I looked at my audience and I said, "They're all dead. Everyone on that list is dead." And so the the men and women that we've left behind is the worst part. I got to a point as a young pilot where I refused to go to another memorial service. I wouldn't do it. We had lost so many friends, and this was in peacetime.
Wow.
And so we had mishap after this, and I think of one. I can't even think too hard about it. It'll choke me up. But yeah,
So the hardest part was, the death of your friends and people under your command. I understand that. You know,
that's
you
right.
you talk about bravery and the training to not be a Cobra pilot, but to be a CH-46 pilot.
Right.
What is the difference between the two? I mean, one is for, I think, an airplane and one is a helicopter, I believe. But
Well,
maybe,
they're both helicopters. So basically, the Marine Corps has four helicopters. We have Cobras, Hueys. We had CH-46s, and now we have V-22s and then CH-53s. And there's some other variations thrown out there, but that's typically what we fly. The 46 pilots, and we always joke about this, right? This is the candor. Cobra pilots are the best, bar none. We are the best pilot, and any Cobra pilot will tell you that. But then a Huey pilot's going to tell you the same thing, and a jet pilot's going to tell you the same thing, right? And I put that funny part in the book, but it was serious when I'm like, Cobra pilots are just better people because that's what we believe, right? Well, the 46 pilots in the Army H-60 pilots, when we were in Iraq, were the bravest men and women I've ever seen. Because when there's a Marine bleeding or a soldier bleeding, they will go through hell to get them out of that LZ. And I remember one time I was escorting a 46, and we came in. It was a troops in contact. It was called a point of injury CASEVAC. So a Marine had been shot, and they needed to get him out. And so Marine 46 comes in. We're escorting with two Cobras. We fly in. We don't see any bad guys. The 46 is coming in, and the forward air control on the radio starts screaming from the wave off because a machine gun was opened up on them. And we're helpless. We don't know where it's coming from. We couldn't see the fire because if we saw it, we'd have just killed them. We couldn't see it. So we're flying in, and the 46 pilot goes, I'm coming to get him anyway. Just as calm as you can believe. So here's a entire crew who we none of us know. There's two Cobras and 146. None of us know where the fire is coming from. We can't see it. We can't hear it. The ground guys are trying to suppress it, and this 46 lands in this minuscule landing zone, pulls out the wounded guy. So we're diving our Cobras in front of him to make sure that they're going to hopefully draw his fire. And then he flies out, and we take the Marine home and save his life.
wow.
And that's what those men and women did for 20 years in Iraq. And believe me, pilots, you know, pilots are very, in my knowledge of all pilots that I know, very few, they are just fearless. And they will go in and they go in and they will save your life, just like we did this weekend, picking up these pilots. That's what we do.
My husband, who passed away about 12 years ago, he was a Navy pilot. He
Oh, awesome.
So he was a commander, and he was
Nice.
in Guam is where he was stationed, and his younger brother was a Cobra pilot. So
Wow.
reading your story gave me a little insight into some of the things that neither of them. Well, that's not true. My brother-in-law was in those battles back in Mogadishu a long time ago. I mean, he was flying in there. So, but
Oh,
I just sort of related a little bit, just in a small way, when you were telling
yeah,
your stories about because Kevin used to talk with just such love about flying airplanes. He just loved it so much.
yeah.
Once you're a pilot, kind of always a pilot. Well, I have a question about all of those, that what you just said about the how brave these people were. Where do these men and women muster up that level of courage to do what they're designed to do in the battlefield?
It's a calling. When you go through flight school, and I talk a lot about flight school in the book, when you go through flight school, it's a weed out process. And that's why I go back to my, initial comments is you only need the best of the best. I do not want to fly with an average pilot. I want to fly with a pilot that's, if there's three pilots, I want to fly with number one, right? And that's that, if there's one slot, the number one pilot should get it. And so it's I don't know. I don't know if we're born with it. I don't know if you learn it. Um, I just it's weird. That's the I hate to say it that way, but it's weird. But I look back and I just if I'm having memories of all of these guys that I know that I've flown with, right? Most of them are men because the vast majority of the Marine pilots, because early on you had to be a male to fly in the Marine Corps, at least combat aircraft. But I don't know. But they're unreal. I look at some of my friends, right? And when it's funny when you sit five Cobra pilots in one room, there's five guys that think they're the best Cobra pilot in the room, right?
Absolutely.
And
And
that's how we do it.
yep, absolutely. You've led high stakes combat environments. How did those experiences influence the lessons on resilience and determination that you really emphasize in your book, Gunfighter's Rule?
Well, one of the things that I jump out is the chapter about Gunfighter Village, which was named after our mission that we had there. That was, and I'm not bragging about this, but in combat, the only time that I really ever felt scared for myself was when we thought we got hit with a chem attack during OAF1. We thought our vehicle, it's a vehicle that alarm goes off, and it's called a FUCH vehicle. We call it a different term, but we call it a negative term. But and I can't remember right now what that even stands for, but it's a warning system, and that vehicle went off, so we thought we got a chem attack. And I really thought we got chem attack, so we put on all of our gear and we're waiting to see if one of us was going to die of chemical poisoning. That was the only time I was personally afraid in all the combat I've been in. But the fear that I had was in the stress that would be in my stomach was not being able to support the people on the ground. And when our Huey landed at Gunfighter Village, and I had all my Marines, and they were trapped on the ground. That was the most gut-wrenching experience I ever felt. And that fear was real, but I was afraid for them. And we fought, and we literally went through every bullet we had in our aircraft to kill the enemy, and we killed a lot of them just to get our guys back off the ground. That was probably the most intense day of my life, and I would say our team of we had three Cobras that were flying that mission to one Huey. The Huey was on the ground. That was probably the best day of flying for all those pilots up to that point because it was a no-fail mission, and we were able to bring all those folks home.
Wow, that's a lot. That really says a lot. And it kind of just lends itself to how, the people that are in the military and they're in troops together, how it really is, there's a bond there that goes beyond words. And I think you describe it pretty well in your book, Gunfighter's Rule. I think this is a good place for us to take a short break. We need to hold that thought right there, Colonel Dunn, and we are going to
Okay.
take a short break to hear from our sponsors from AmericaOutloud.news. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays the Tenpenny Files on the iHeartRadio network every day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you've missed any of these really great conversations that we've had, and believe me, they've been really, really interesting, that really expanded my knowledge base by reading all these books. I can tell you that for sure. And I read them all. The Tenpenny Files is now can be found on Spotify, Pandora, Apple, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeart Virtual Studio, and on my platforms, we broadcast to X, Rumble, Instagram, and now we have a YouTube channel where you can go to the Tenpenny Files and watch us on YouTube. We'll see how long the powers that be let us stay up there because every time I've tried to start a YouTube channel, they take me down. But I think the easiest way and the best way is to go to our my website, which is dr10penny.com. Hover over the podcast tab. There'll be a drop-down window. The line at the top tells you who the guests are for that week, and you scroll down a little bit farther. It says all podcasts, and that's a really simple, quick way for you to find them that you can listen or watch. Because there's so many great books and documentaries and so little time. This show's meant to maximize your time and jumpstart your interest. We're going to hear a short break from our sponsors right now. If they are interesting to you, please support them because that's who supports us. Sit right there. Sit tight for just a minute. We're going to be right back with retired career Marine and president of Strategic Resilience Group, Colonel William Dunn, to talk more about Gunfighter's Rule, the life story of becoming a Marine. And we're also going to talk more about current events and what's going on in Iran right now. You won't want to miss this. We will be right back. Zeolite is a detox spray. We work specifically with a company called Touchstone Essentials. They are an incredible company. We've been working with them now for several years. And zeolite is a mineral that goes through your body like a one-way basket. It will clean out heavy metals such as arsenic and mercury, aluminum, cadmium, and it hooks onto those metals from a one-way perspective. So once it's bound, it goes out through your urine or your stools and doesn't get redeposited in other places. Everybody needs to have a detox product in their life, and this one is so easy to use and it's so safe. You can take it when you're pregnant, you can take it when you're nursing, you can give it to little children, you can even give it to infants, and quite frankly, I give it to my dog. I actually put a little bit of the zeolite in his water because until we all stop living in a toxic world, we all need to get some of those extra toxicities out, the heavy metals, the persistent organic pollutants, the things that are floating through the air, the different things that we come in touch with in our environment. And we are a big fan of zeolite from Touchstone Essentials. We've been a big fan of their products for several years. Go to drtenpenny.com/detox to get your first bottle of zeolite spray for $50 off.
Well, only when the government bows to the people will America become great again. This is Malcolm Out Loud here. Join me in pushing back against censorship, my fellow Americans. Right at the top of AmericaOutloud.news are the words: many voices, one freedom, united in the First Amendment. Now is our time, my fellow Americans. AmericaOutloud.news, liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the Tenpenny Files. Today's conversation is with retired Marine and president of Strategic Resilience Group, Colonel William Dunn, talking about his book, Gunfighter's Rule, which is an autobiography life story about becoming and being a career Marine and a story of resilience and determination. Let me tell you just a little bit more about our today's guest. Colonel William Dunn began in the U.S. Marine Corps in 1983. Arising through the ranks as a Cobra helicopter pilot, he combined his military career with academic pursuits, earning a bachelor's degree in business administration and later an MBA from Boston University. Over his 33-year military career, he completed deployments in Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, Yemen, Libya, and many other operational areas in support of the 5th and 6th Fleets. After retiring, Colonel Dunn assumed the role of president of the Strategic Resilient Group, a team of business leaders, veteran military officers, and experienced engineers working to create strategies and operational planning for federal agencies within the Department of Defense. His personal mission and life is deeply rooted in his extensive experiences in high-stakes environments. Colonel Dunn, thank you so much for writing this book and giving us a behind-the-scenes look at what it's like to be a Marine. And thanks for joining me here today on the show.
Well, yeah, and Dr. Tenpenny, thanks so much for having me.
You know, on March the 12th of this year, March the 12th of 2026, a U.S. KC-135 refueling aircraft crashed in western Iraq, where all crew members died. For viewers who are not familiar with what that aircraft is, what role does a KC-135 tanker play in military operations?
Well, typically it's going to be a refueling aircraft that will fill up with gas. It'll take off. It'll go to an area, and then it doesn't necessarily have to be jet fighters, but most likely jet fighters will come in, and there'll be what we consider an aero refueling track, and so that'll be up in the sky turning around at certain altitude, and then the jets will come in and refuel, and that will stay on station for a period of time, and then it will go back and usually refuel and then come back out. In this case, there were two of them. I don't know. They haven't said exactly what they were both doing, whether they were both refuelers sharing a track or whether one was refueling the other. I don't know what they were doing, but it appears that they somehow collided. And there'll be a big investigation. It's ongoing right now. And the good news is that one of the aircraft survived. And so the investigation will have great information because they'll be able to tell most likely what happened. and it seems they had a midair collision, and then one of them did not survive. And of course, all crew members were fatalities in that.
I've watched some videos on YouTube where they show the refueling lock mechanism of how that
Yeah.
happens. That just seems like almost a physical impossibility to be able to up at that speed, that everybody's going at that speed, that the things lock and then they can refuel. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, as a Cobra pilot, we don't air refuel, but I have been in the aircraft that have air refueled, and it is amazing. It requires precision, it requires amazing flying. But our men and women that are flying these refuelable aircraft, they practice it a lot and they're very good at it. And they can come in and they plug it right in and fill up very quickly. So it is high risk, right? Because you're flying that close to another airplane. You have to be able to do this in the daytime as well as in the night. And so it's not an easy thing. And I give kudos to all the pilots that are able to do that and can do that routinely because, well, when we get gas, we have to land and plug in a fuel dispenser right to the Cobra and it fills us up. But yeah, it's intense and it requires a high level of skill to do that and to do it safely.
I
And
would.
as you can see in some instances, this is not the first mishap we've had with refueling aircraft. We've had some with the Marine Corps refueling jets, and we've had some with other services, but it's a risky business.
This one they seemed to come to conclusions pretty quickly about what had happened. How long does it usually take before they get clear answers when there's are crashes like that?
It all depends, right? It could be weeks, it could be years.
Wow.
Sometimes, one of my friends crashed in a KC-130, or I'm sorry, a CH-53, and they never found the aircraft. They found pieces of it, and he was the only one. He survived the crash, but then he died. So the entire crew was he was the only body that was recovered, and the aircraft sank too deep to go get, and so they decided not to get it. So it's very hard to say sometimes, and sometimes it is a guess, but most of the time it is very clear, especially if they can get the wreckage back. It's very clear on what happened to the aircraft. I crashed in a Cobra once out in 29 Palms, California, and that investigation, which cleared me, I wasn't 100% in agreement with the investigation, as I talk about in the book. But I think that took 4 to 6 months. And I honestly can't remember exactly how long it took, but it really depends. I think 6 months to a year is pretty standard, but it could be quicker, and sometimes it could be a lot longer.
We talked briefly in the first half of the show about the rescue mission that happened, in recently in Iran when they were recuperating that pilot. What do you have to say about that and about the most recent events that are happening in Iran?
Well, first off, every pilot that goes down range, we have a bond with each other that if you go down, we're coming to get you. Someone's coming to get you. You have to survive. We call it surviving the merge, whether you get shot down or whether you have to eject or, you merge with the ground. If you're a helicopter pilot, you have to maybe auto rotate. But once you're on the ground, if you survive, we're coming to get you alive, hopefully. Most pilots in the Gulf War, some pilots were captured because they had no choice, right? They were surrounded by Iraqis, or they were wounded so bad they couldn't get away. But if you can get away, we're trained to get away. We're trained to get away from populations, and we're trained to hide until we can come get rescued. And we also believe that our brothers and sisters are going to put their lives on the line to come in and get us because we'll do it for them. So that mission was a beautiful success. It shows the power and might of the United States, and it also shows the dedication that we have to each other when you go down behind enemy lines. Think of many of our adversary countries. Do you think they would have spent that amount of assets and time to go rescue one Russian pilot or one Chinese pilot? Most likely not. But we will. And if one goes down today or one goes down tomorrow, we're coming to get you. And the brave men and women of our military are, we talked about being the brave folks. They have no idea what's waiting for them, right? They really don't. And when you're doing these missions, a guy hops out behind of a rock with an AK-47 can become a problem for a pilot landing to pick up a survivor. So it's very dangerous, very risky, but we know they're coming, and they know if it's them, we're coming to get them.
What do you think is we mentioned just briefly before we went live on the show here, what was kind of going on in Iran, and you said, "Well, I think I understand it."
Yeah.
So lighten the rest of us that don't understand it.
Well, Iran has killed Americans for 47 years. And I talk about this in the book. The first the first thing that happened, which was Iran-backed Hezbollah, killed 241 Marine sailors and soldiers in the Beirut bombing in 1983. That's how long they've been killing us. In
Hmm.
Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years, they helped our enemies get explosively formed penetrators to kill us. They launched attacks on U.S. military bases when another administration was in power, and we did nothing. Hundreds of them. So this is not new. And they promised if they got a nuclear weapon, they were going to use it. And I think they were very close. So we had no choice but to go in and take that capability away. We've always known, it's always been planned that as soon as we start action in Iran, they're going to shut the Straits of Hormuz down. That's not a surprise. We did a great job, in my opinion, getting that opened up in a few short weeks. And obviously, there's still risk and threat there. But what we did is we have destroyed Iranians' war-making infrastructure and war-making capability. Does that mean they have some missiles left that they could shoot? Absolutely. There's no doubt. But what they can't do anymore is hold court in the Middle East and put their neighbors, the US and Israel, at risk at a high level. Always a risk. There's always you could have a sleeper cell. You could have an individual that puts a bomb on their back and goes and kills some troops. But strategically, their capability to wage war has been so diminished, it's probably no longer a factor. That mission has been planned. I took a unit when I was the MAG 40 commander into the Middle East in 2012 to prepare for a mission like this.
Wow.
So that's how long this has been going on. And we've been planning, we've got contingency plans ready to go. And during this 2 week ceasefire, our men and women are planning on targets and which targets are going to strike next, should they need to. So it had to be done. President Trump did it. Our men and women executed this thing near flawlessly. And the fact that we have not lost more aircraft is amazing. And people will get upset that we lost one, which I do, right? We don't want to lose a single airplane. But as I mentioned earlier, I stopped going to memorial services because too many of our friends were killed, and that wasn't even in combat. So we've come a long way in aviation. Aviation is still dangerous, but we're getting better at it. It's a non-stop mission to be safe when you fly. And the fact that we've had so few casualties is a blessing.
Well, that sheds a little bit different light on things because there's a lot of controversy about, President Bush saying, or I'm sorry, President Trump saying, he's the peace president and wanted to get out of forever wars and not go back into Iran or any of these places.
Yeah.
But and I think a lot of followers were really discouraged by that because they said when we went into Iraq, it was going to be just a couple years and $5 billion. It ended up to be
Yeah.
20 some years and $5 trillion. And
That's
so I
right.
think that Americans are really concerned about that.
Well, I am too, but here's the thing that we always have to remember. On day one, President Trump says, I don't want to go to war. Does that mean if the enemy is building a nuclear weapon, we're not going to go to war? Absolutely not. So we don't want to go to war. And having spent time in combat, I don't want anyone to ever be in combat ever again. It's horrible, right? It is not, when I went into Iraq the first time during OAF1 as a forward air controller, I was literally stressed out that I was going to miss the war. I know that sounds crazy, right? We all train, we want to be there with our brothers when we're fighting. That's just our mentality. So I was stressed out that I was going to miss it. And I'm glad I went. I do not regret being there. After being there and being in combat both on the ground and in the air, I would pray that we never have to send a man or woman into combat ever again. I know that's not realistic, unfortunately, and sure enough, we've been doing it for the last 6 to 8 weeks. But the enemy has a say in everything we do. And so when we make a statement that we don't want a forever war, which I believe, but the enemy does in action, they force our hand. And that's the thing that I would love for people to understand is that we do not want forever wars. Hopefully, this will be a 8 to 10 week war. But what we don't want to do is have a civilization destroyed in Israel or in the United States by a nuclear weapon. And we do not want the world does not want any country to cross the nuclear threshold in combat by lighting off a nuke somewhere because it's devastating. So I think the mission was great. The one thing I wish, and I think I know why he did it, because our enemy only understands strength. I did not like the comment about we're going to take out a civilization. I would have used a different word. Uh, I know what I believe he meant is the civilization of the regime, but that is not how sometimes a translation gets out to a public, whether you are a US public or an Iranian public. The Iranian people are not our enemy. And President Trump has made that clear over and over again. I'm concerned that when he used that civilization term, when that gets translated into Farsi, that may make them feel that they were at risk, which is what we don't want. Now, it worked. We're in a ceasefire right now. So there'll be pundits that'll say, I can't believe you used that word. It's a terrible word. They're throwing out the word war crimes, genocide. By using that word, maybe that was the only word that the Iranians were going to listen to and come to the table for a peace talk. And if that's the case, then I don't care about the word.
We went in and bombed Iran. I think it was last year, and they said, was it last year where they said we've taken out all of their nuclear capability, and they made a big deal about
Right.
the bombing that they did. But apparently they didn't, and that's why we needed to do this again.
Well, I'm sure there's some very highly classified information that they will not let out. But imagine one scenario. Let's just imagine a scenario. We bombed their nuclear capability, which we did, and I believe we were very successful at it. Did anything prevent Russia or China for then giving them a boatload of depleted or a boatload of enriched uranium or something to build a nuclear weapon? We don't know that, right? So what we don't know is the government's going to let out so much information that will tell us why we went and started Epic Fury because we don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. But what we don't know is was there a different tripwire that they're not telling us? That maybe they had a nuclear weapon sitting on a table somewhere, or maybe they were a day away from a nuclear weapon or a week away. We don't know that because the enemy always has a say. We do an action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. We blow up Natan's facility, they go build it somewhere else. And what we don't know is what happened from the day that we dropped those bombs in last summer until we started Epic Fury. We don't know 100% what happened, and there's classified reasons why they may not be telling us.
And which it brings me up to just another point here is about strategic resilience group. And I don't know how much of what you do is classified that you can even talk about, but what kind of a role does that play in the planning and decision making of what's going on right now?
Well, what our men and women are doing to support the government is mainly in data analytics and in information warfare. So we are supporting our brothers and sisters all over the world doing information warfare, and that's probably That's probably all we'll say about that. They're supporting it. They're supporting them in the U.S. and overseas. We have folks in the Middle East right now that have been under siege at some points in their career. They're all safe, thankfully. They all made it out and they all survived the merge. But we were very worried about them early on. We just talked to them all this week, so they're all doing okay. Some of them will be coming back to the States in the near future, but that's what we do. Um, in information warfare is just what it sounds like, whether it's social media supporting effects and efforts out in the Middle East or other places. That's what our team does. It's just one of the many things that Strategic Resilience Group does.
I had a conversation recently with Casey Fleming, who's from, intelligence and, high up government sort of stuff. And he wrote a book called The Red Tsunami about the CCP takeover of America. And he said how Sun Tzu in The Art of War was the one who came up with the phrase "death by a thousand cuts."
That's right.
He felt that America has had about 950 cuts, and that we have no idea how the advancement of the CCP in this country has taken over most everything. Do you have any opinion about that?
I do. Americans need to open their eyes. It's not just the CCP, it's also some of the Islamic Revolution. We
Wow.
need to get back and remember there's no shame in being an American. We've got liberals that are trying to shame us into whether you are white or black or whatever race you happen to be today that they don't like. They want to make you ashamed of being who you are. And we need to get rid of all that. We're Americans. And we need to remember that because there are many countries and many actors out there that want to take what we have. And we have morons, and I'll say that we have morons in America that think if China comes and takes over America, that they're going to be our friends. And they're not. Unfortunately, every country works and operates in their best interest. And it would be in some countries' best interest to be having their people run our Americans and have us work for them. And there are a lot of stupid Americans out there, unfortunately, that don't see it because they're blinded by some of the internet and they're blinded by an ideology that they may have learned in whether it's college or high school or wherever they learned it because they're being manipulated. They need to open their eyes.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And Casey talks about his book. He's got a 60-day plan in the back about community-wide, boots on the ground here in America, about taking our country back. And he said pretty much the same thing you said about Americans need to wake up because somehow the liberal people seem to think they think socialism and communism is going to apply to everybody else but them. They're
Right,
still going
right.
to have their First Amendment rights and their Second Amendment rights, and it's going to apply to everybody but them. And they're sorely mistaken for that.
That's right. That's right.
Well, we're down to the last couple of minutes of our conversation here today, and this has just been delightful. I've really enjoyed this, just like I really enjoyed your book. And we gave kind of a high-level overview of what your book's about, but why should people buy your book, Gunfighters Rule, read it, and have it in their personal library?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about resilience and determination ultimately. That's the theme of the book. When I was growing up, my father passed away, our house burnt up. I had to make a decision at a young age, um, what kind of man I was going to become. And had I not joined the Marine Corps, I'm not sure which kind of man I would have become. And so it talks a lot about that. And then it shows how hard it is. Even though I love being a Marine, it was never easy. We always say the only easy day was yesterday. That's one of the SEAL mottos, but that's true. The only easy day is yesterday, and every day is a new challenge. And if you pick up this book, one, if you're a combat veteran, I think it's going to stress you out a little bit, but maybe in a good way. One of my friends said, I talk about the white shirt man, and one of my friends called me up and he says, I have some white shirt men in my life. And if you read the book, you'll understand that because that white shirt man, I'm thinking about him right now. I can never get him out of my head. And so many combat veterans will have a white shirt man that they will think about. And then if you are a non-military person, what you're going to see is what it really takes to want to be a Marine, but then to go out and fight and be in combat and live through it, and then, continue with your family and put the pieces back together, and then run your life because sometimes it's not easy. And I think you'll enjoy it. As I was saying earlier, my youngest daughter read it, and she went from laughing to crying to laughing and then being appalled all at the same time. So I think the reader will have a journey if they get a copy.
I agree with that totally. I think that's a great assessment because that really sums it up. And it's written in such a way that you can really literally feel yourself walking through the things that you experienced with some of the tensions inside of your commanders and, the people that you worked with and the battlefield scenes and stuff like that. So, Colonel Dunn, thank you so much for writing it and sharing it because it really is a behind the scenes thing for civilians to really understand. And I agree with you with what you said that if you read this book and you have been a Marine or you've been in one of the branches of the military, it's really going to resonate with you. It's going to show a lot of, tell the world what your experience has been that maybe other people haven't been able to put that into words. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you for sharing your insights about the government and current events. Thank you for being with us here today. And for everybody else, thank you for joining us. I hope you really enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Be sure you like it and share it on all of our different social media platforms. And go pick up a copy of this book. And you could get it at our bookstore, which is bookstore.drtenpenny.com, bookstore.drtenpenny.com, where we put all of our authors' books in there just to make it convenient for you. So with that, I want to close out with one of my favorite verses from the Bible. I close all of my podcasts with, whether they are live or pre-recorded, which is Romans 12:12. Rejoice in hope, be patient in trouble, and be persistent in prayer. God's with you all the time. He promised he will never leave you nor forsake you, and he's a man of his word. So we'll see you again here tomorrow, right here at the Tenpenny Files at 3 p.m. Eastern, or the next time. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great day, everybody. Goodbye, and God bless.